So I was talking to a friend recently, and she said that she simply could not imagine her life without thinking a lot. She thinks a lot. That's how she is, and she doesn't think that's ever going to change. And I've considered a lot the role of thought in my life, and I think that we all think an awful lot, and it seems very important, all the thinking that we do. But I think that's a good idea to kind of take a look at that a little deeper. How much of the thinking that we do is important or necessary? And I think that we all have kind of a sense that somehow thought is creating a lot of trouble for us. Don't think about it. People say stuff like that all the time. So it seems to us like, on the one hand, thought is creating a lot of trouble. But then on the other hand, it seems pretty obvious to us that we need to think in our daily life, right? I mean, we can't just be a total void. We need to think to do various things within our life, and that seems pretty obvious too. So that's what I like to consider today, is this issue of thinking. And we use thought in our daily life to solve problems, right? We use thought in our daily life to do everything that we need to do. Some of us have very technical careers that we're involved in, and it is nonsensical and unrealistic to think that thought doesn't have some place in our lives. So we can't completely excuse thought, and yet at the same time, thought creates trouble. So I think we've all had times where we feel like we are thinking so incessantly about something that if we could just stop thinking about it, that would probably solve a lot of the issue. And so I think based on that, we've realized that maybe we could be happier without thinking. And I think that that's where all of the religious motivations have sort of taken on things like meditation as a way to solve this problem. And meditation is a way of attempting to control our thought. And so that if we think we control our thoughts really well, get everything to be quiet, then we can be at peace. And then we may have some sort of spiritual experience based on that. So, so meditation really is an attempt to kill thought. And that may be reasonable in a monastery to not have thought. But obviously in our day-to-day lives, we need thought. And, that's what brought my attention to the type of spirituality that doesn't disclude our daily lives. I wanted to figure out a way to live in this world happily. I wasn't interested in running off to a monastery and trying to hide there and trying to find some sort of spiritual ecstasy, because there are certain aspects of life that I enjoy. I enjoy being around people. I enjoy being active. I enjoy not being active. But mostly I have found that I enjoy being engaged in the world, and I didn't want a spiritual practice that shuttered me off from it. So unfortunately, I think that for people that have been involved in spirituality for a long time and have sort of dipped their toes in various waters, I think thinking itself has become a pretty big issue. And for a lot of us, I think that there may be a lot of inner conflict about thinking itself, thinking as a concept. And so when you go off in one of these long tirades in your head, is there a part of you that then looks at that and judges that and decides, I'm thinking too much about this, or I shouldn't be thinking about this, or thinking is wrong, or thinking is right? I think part of the issue with thought for us is actually the demonization of thought. The fact that, oh, if I just didn't think so much, maybe I could achieve enlightenment. And so I think that that's something to look into, think about, ironically, and try to get an insight into whether or not that's something that you do, because I think that's very important. I think that we have to eventually make peace with the fact that we do think. Thought is there. Thought arises within us all the time. Not just words, but pictures in our mind, words and pictures. And these things arise, and I personally don't see that ever stopping for the rest of my life. And I'm not necessarily sure we had a lot of control over what we think in particular. What we may have some ability to resolve is what we think about what we think, not what we think. Whether we like or dislike it, whether it horrifies us what we're thinking about, or whether we feel justified in what we're thinking about, or whether we wish we weren't thinking so much. But to go back to the idea of thought as an entity that creates problems, when we think about certain things, it is sort of part of the process of our problems. When we have desires, when we have fears, when we have likes, dislikes, regrets, anger, all of these things do require thinking. Or rather, thinking seems to be part of that process. We're not exactly sure exactly how, but it does seem that thinking is embedded in that process. And I think part of understanding ourselves and realizing a lot about ourselves involves understanding sort of the part that thinking plays in all of those problems we have. And yet to most of us, a lot of our problems, I don't feel like we're fully aware of what they are, how they come about, and what they're comprised of. I think a lot of us are actually on the periphery of all of that, trying to grapple with a way of handling our problems. So a lot of us, I think, function at a much more superficial level with our thinking. And a lot of it is more thinking about what to do about this mess of problems that continually occurs to us on a day-to-day basis, depending on the circumstance or depending on what we're thinking. Thinking itself can't do anything about any of this. Awareness is the only thing that can do anything about any of this. Awareness of what's going on. And I think what's going on for most of us is that we are using thought as a process to fix ourselves. And so we need to first become aware not of our problems. That's probably down the road. But become aware of how we're attempting to use thought to fix our problems. And it may not be in particular the specific way that you're using thought, but just the fact that you're using thought in general. That is, to me, the first step. And like I said, we all use thought in various ways, but seeing that we're using thinking as a response to our problems in any way that we decide to use it is, to me, the first step. So for me, thinking was a way that I would try to understand my problems. So I felt like if I could just understand through thinking about my problems, if I could understand the problem, then maybe I could resolve the problem. Now, the issue with that is that thinking can just go on forever, analyzing and trying to understand itself. It just never felt like I got to any conclusion. It just continued on and on. And I think there's a lot of a tendency for people to do that when they're using thought as a method of spirituality. And I think a lot of the people on YouTube and a lot of the philosophy around enlightenment and awakening has to do with thoughts. And so I think that we really have to look into this issue of thought itself and see whether it's actually bringing us anywhere conclusive. So are we aware of how much effort we put into all of this thinking? Tremendous amounts of effort. Frankly, when you consider how much effort you put into thinking, it seems to me that that's why I was always tired. That's why I was always lethargic, was how much effort I put into thinking. So can we become aware, even if it's a little difficult to see how thought addresses itself with thinking, can we just start to become aware of how much effort is placed in thinking? I don't mean effort when you're at work trying to do something. I mean effort at a personal level as you try to handle the various situations that cause trouble in your lives. And then I want you to consider this. And this is something that I consider often. Has it gotten us anywhere? We are continually trying to adjust our reality, our problems, with thinking. And I think at a certain point, there has to be some skepticism about thinking itself. And I think that's a difficult concept. It's a difficult pill to swallow because thought seems so vastly important in our world. Consider how much importance our civilization puts on thinking, whether it's through schooling, whether it's through all the books written, whether it's through people like me putting out thoughts in YouTube. A tremendous amount of effort is put into the thinking process and thoughts placed into the world. So I think it's a fairly radical concept to actually begin to think, hey, maybe thought is not getting me where I think it should be getting me. So to me, part of the beginnings of looking into ourselves and part of the beginnings of becoming aware of ourselves has to do with devaluing our thinking and starting to question how valuable thinking is on a day-to-day basis with our problems as they arise. And I think that that becomes easier to understand when we start to become aware of ourselves. And so the trade is thought out, awareness in. So I'm not going to go into what I think awareness is all about in this talk, but awareness is not thought. we can't convince ourselves through thinking about something that we're aware of it. And so that's where you really start to dive into understanding who you are. Understanding isn't through thinking. Understanding isn't through making a decision about what you are through thinking further. Understanding, in my mind, comes through awareness of yourself. And awareness is not thought.